It had been a while since I've chatted with Kellis Robinett, who covers Kansas State for the Star and Wichita Eagle, so we caught up on the latest happenings in the land of the Wildcats. This is SportsBeat KC, the Star's daily sports podcast. It's Wednesday, May 12th, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. The football roster seems set. Maybe the Cats are on the lookout for a couple of defensive additions through the transfer portal, but otherwise, Chris Klieman has the team he'll take into the 2021 season. We discuss how it stacks up in the Big 12 and give a first look at the league race. After a break, we switch sports and talk hoops. Last season was dismal for Kansas State until the end. The Cats played eventual national champion Baylor as well as any team in the NCAA Tournament, and there's reason for optimism for Coach Bruce Weber's bunch next season. So let's get started talking Kansas State with Kellis Robinett. Kellis, when was the last time we got together and talked Kansas State sports? It's been a while.
It's been too long. I know that.
Yeah, I know that we caught up right after the basketball season. And you know what? You go back and think about the way K-State lost their final game competitively to Baylor. Baylor turned out to be a good team at the end.
Yeah, big surprise, right? They were okay in the NCAA Tournament. Who'd have thunk it?
And Kansas State played great. We'll get to K-State basketball in a little while, but I wanted to start with some football, Kellis. And
okay.
It's really never not football season, and it's never not roster building time for college football. But with Kansas State, while I read about all the other programs that are shopping in the transfer portal, Kansas State has not been terribly active there, but they're looking, aren't they?
They are. They did most of their damage, early on, so they could get as many of their transfers in as they could for spring ball. The only guy they added late was Cade Warner, famously Kurt Warner's son from Nebraska, former walk-on wide receiver there. So we'll see what he can bring to Kansas State. But, hey, if you can add the son of a former NFL MVP, I don't care what he used to be. I think that's at least worth the dice roll there, and it should be fun to watch. But otherwise, since they added him, it's been real quiet, which is kind of interesting because Chris Klieman and pretty much in both his coordinators made it pretty clear that if they could add more talent, especially more veteran talent through the transfer portal before summer got here, they were going to do it. And they've still got some holes in the secondary. They could really use an extra safety. They could really use somebody to slide in there and play nickelback. And they could really even use a linebacker if they could find one. But they haven't added any of them yet. They're looking at some guys. Nobody's hopped on board yet. And it'll be interesting if they can add one or two more veteran defenders here that could really help them out depth-wise next season. But if not, then they're going to really be crossing their fingers that injuries don't happen at the wrong positions.
Right. I agree with you on Cade Warner. He didn't have big numbers at Nebraska, but I don't know if he was used the way that he should have been used. But he came there as a walk-on, ended up getting a scholarship, and at least if nothing else, Kellis, that's a good feature story to do in the fall.
That's right. And I mean, it's not like that type of player has lacked for success at Kansas State in the past, right? A hardworking kid from a good family who knows football and has a good IQ. Maybe, best case scenario, he turns out to be another Dalton Schoen who has a really good rapport with Skylar Thompson. They can hook up on every money down, move the chains when they have to. It can maybe be a valuable slot receiver. But, even if he's not that, you can always use an extra body out there, somebody who knows what he's doing. So I like the ad for sure.
Otherwise, how is if we're looking at a roster that's relatively set with maybe only a couple of missing pieces, what's the anticipation? I'm starting to read some Big 12 preview stuff, and I think Oklahoma is clearly the Big 12 favorite once again. It'll be news when Oklahoma isn't the favorite
right
in the Big 12. And usual suspects near the top: Texas, Oklahoma State. What's the post spring practice feeling about Kansas State?
It really depends on who you ask. You can go out and find some fans who think they'll be right there with Oklahoma, Iowa State for the Big 12 championship. Find other people who think they'll be right back where they were last season, not even bowl eligible. And there is, it is interesting. I don't know if I've ever walked into a season with a team that has, really no set floor, no set ceiling. I mean, I could see them going anywhere from 5 to 9 wins, just depending on how things shake out, because there are a bunch of unknowns with Skylar Thompson back. How much is he going to elevate the offense? We saw last year, especially during the last half of the season, they really fell off, couldn't pass the ball at all. And you can either blame that on the receivers, you can blame it on Will Howard being a true freshman quarterback who wasn't ready. And does that change with Skylar Thompson back in there? I mean, we've seen it over the years. Nothing beats veteran quarterback play. And there's not going to be many people who've started more games than Skylar Thompson anywhere. So with him coming back, you would think that could certainly boost the offense. And if that happens, then yeah, they'll probably be back in a bowl game. If not, the defense is going to have to play quite a bit better than we saw late last season. And they have added some talents. I mean, it is interesting how much they've added through the transfer portal. I think some of their very best players are Julius Brents, a defensive back they got from Iowa, Timmy Horn, a defensive tackle they got from Charlotte. Their tight end, Daniel Imatorbhebhe, I think he could be as good as Bradley Moore was. And, but it really just depends. Can those guys stay healthy? Can they make the transition really fast? If they can, then you're probably looking at a pretty good season. If they struggle and they have to go through growing pains, and you're maybe looking at some other losses. But just it really is interesting because Chris Kleinman's time at Kansas State really turned on a dime last year, didn't it? I mean, he went from 4-1, beating Oklahoma, being on top of the Big 12 standings, to then losing 5 straight games down the stretch and having all these transfers and nobody knowing what in the world to think of it. So I guess we'll find out, were those COVID season problems that aren't going to linger, or are they signs of more problems on the horizon? I don't know, but they do have some talent coming back. And yeah, that at least gives them some hope that they can bounce back quickly if things fall into place.
That's a good point about wondering if, how COVID and the pandemic affected the program. In the Big 12, the majority of teams have their quarterback returning, starting with Spencer Rattler at OU, and then staying in the state, another Spencer Saunders at Oklahoma State is back. Max Duggan at TCU, Brock Purdy, of course, at Iowa State. I think it'll be interesting to see between Purdy and Rattler who's the preseason choice for all-conference quarterback. Jared Dagey up at West Virginia, Alan Bowman at Texas Tech. So majority have their quarterbacks back, and with Skylar Thompson, I think that puts Kansas State in that category, right? The programs that have the returning starting quarterback, and you always give them a little bit benefit of the doubt. Excuse me, going into a season. Texas does not have its, Sam Ehlinger certainly is done. Charlie Brewer at Baylor has transferred. I think he landed at Utah. And of course, Kansas, you just kind of revolve it. You never know with Kansas
right.
Quarterback. They're hoping this Jason Bean, the transfer from North Texas, is an answer for them. So yeah, it's quite an advantage, excuse me, to have starting quarterback returning as Kansas State does. I was looking at the Big 12 schedules, and I think the league is going to end up looking really good once conference play begins. Some really smart scheduling. The sort of the high profile, big name opponents for each of the Big 12 schools are programs that Big 12 programs should beat. And by that, I mean Oklahoma's big non-conference opponent this year is Nebraska. For Texas, it's Arkansas. For Kansas State, it is Stanford. And look, I look at that as almost a toss-up game right now. West Virginia plays Maryland and Virginia Tech. Oklahoma State's got an interesting game at Boise State. Anyway, I just think that the way the season sets up in September, there are going to maybe a lot of Big 12 schools with good records heading into conference play. I noticed somebody asked you a question in your Q&A, and I thought this was interesting. If you had to just pick one game, one K-State game to get to this year, which one would it be? And you suggested the Stanford game. It depends on what you're looking for, obviously, but the Stanford game at Arlington, that's going to be a table setter for the Wildcats. Good chance to make a first impression.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing, I wrote a story about this a few years ago, but it is interesting. The few times that Kansas State has gone out and really challenged themselves in their opening game, it hasn't been often. That wasn't really Bill Snyder's cup of tea to go schedule a Power 5 team right off the bat. But when they have done it and won that game, they've gone on to have really good seasons. When they beat Iowa and Arrowhead, when they beat Cal and Arrowhead, those were some of their better seasons. Beating USC obviously didn't hurt them when they played them back in the day. I remember the first season during Bill Snyder's second tenure here at Kansas State, the first time they went to a bowl, they opened up at UCLA here and beat them with Daniel Thomas running wild over the Bruins. And that was really the table setter that, hey, Kansas State's back. They're going to be in a bowl this season. And yeah, I think it could be the same thing this year. If they win that game, then that really announces to everybody, you know what happened down the stretch last year was just a fluke, with guys in and out of COVID, all kinds of weird circumstances. But now with Skylar back, Kansas State's ready to contend again in the Big 12 for a top half finish, something like that. And beyond that, I think it's just a fun game because, how often do you get to see Kansas State play in a pro stadium? Not very often. And especially after last year we've went through where, we're relegated to a quarter of attendance everywhere. There's a pretty good opportunity. That's going to be a full attendance. Texas is a little bit more lax than some other places right now on, mask mandates and rules and such. So I would think that's a game where if you want to just go in, have a good time, watch a game without a mask on and be around your buddies, that's probably your best opportunity to do so. Maybe it'll be that way across the country. We saw Sporting Kansas City is going to start having full attendance here later in May. I don't know if it'll be that way everywhere. Riley County's kind of been back and forth on it. They still aren't allowing more than 50% anywhere here. So you never know what attendance is going to be like up here. But I bet down there, especially with a big, I don't know how big their stadium is, but it's big, 80,000 or so. If you want to get in and watch a game under normal circumstances after what we've been through, that's the game to kick it back off and have some fun.
Yeah, Chiefs are saying that they're expecting full houses for their games, and of course the NFL schedule is being announced today. We've talked about it before. I know we have, but I always, whenever it comes up, I have to share my memories of the two games that you mentioned earlier. The Iowa game that opened, I think it was the 2000 season. I think that was Kirk Ferentz's second year, maybe first or second year at Iowa. And
it was 2000.
And Arrowhead Stadium was the hottest place on planet Earth that day. It was unbelievably hot, over 100 degrees. Then, of course, the Cal game, a couple years later, that was the major college debut of one Aaron Rodgers.
That's right.
Came off the bench and threw a couple. I remember Kansas State was blowing out Cal, and they bring this quarterback in that I hadn't heard of, and he throws a couple of touchdown passes. I'm like, wow, who's this guy? Pretty impressive stuff. So the other development that has an impact on Kansas State football is the hire of a new coach down the road at KU with Lance Leipold. KU hired him from Buffalo, and whenever Kansas State hires a new coach, KU takes notice, and vice versa. So, what was the reaction at Kansas State for this KU hire, and what was I asked you what the K-State reaction is. How the heck would you know? But what was your reaction as someone who covers Kansas State?
I think it's interesting. I think finally Kansas has done probably what they should have done from the get-go after they parted ways with Mark Mangino. The last four coaches they've had have all just been train wrecks of different varieties, right? Turner Gill
not ready.
Yeah, not ready. Who came next in there? Was it Charlie Weiss? Charlie Weiss was just a terrible idea.
Yep.
David Beatty, the same deal, not ready. Receivers coach, wasn't even a coordinator yet, got him cheap. And then Les Miles was basically a repeat of Charlie Weiss. So this time they decided, let's not get a coach who's not ready. Let's not get a coach who's a retread and hasn't been successful in a while. Let's go out and get a coach who's won previously. Maybe doesn't have flash. Maybe he's not going to come in and win the press conference, but he's at least proven he can win football games at other places. So I think if anything, he should at least raise the floor there. I don't know how much you could put Newt Rodney back in there. I don't know how much he could raise the ceiling of Kansas in 5 years. Maybe this is a guy who can finally raise the floor a little bit, bring him up to where instead of hoping for like 2 or 3 wins, maybe you're thinking 4 or 5 and the occasional bowl game. I don't know that he really, strikes fear into anybody in Manhattan right now. But at the same time, I will say that the approach he laid out in his press conference about trying to recruit much more locally and competing with Kansas State for some of the guys who basically for the last 12 years, they've just been bringing in unopposed. That to me could really make things more interesting than anything else. If I don't think Kansas is going to be able to come in and compete with Kansas State for the top tier guys in the state just yet until they prove that they can win a few games and sell their program a little bit more. But you know what? Those second and third tier guys who in the past have their best option has been Kansas State, or maybe even Kansas State is only as a walk-on. If KU now is giving them a little bit more love and gives them something to think about, then maybe that drains a little bit of talent that's been coming here in previous years. And if there's one way that I think KU can close the gap on this rivalry more than it has been lately, that's one way to do it. And we'll see if he actually follows through. I mean, every coach comes in and says we're going to recruit locally. Not all of them follow through with it. I believe Les Miles said he was going to try to recruit locally and gave up on that really fast. So, yeah, we'll see. But if he follows through on it, I think it could be interesting and especially make the recruiting scene more competitive than it has been.
Yeah, you're right. Kansas State's made a living off of players who they've invited walk-ons who eventually get a scholarship, and some of them end up in the NFL. I mean, that's how they developed, how well they developed. And a BJ Finney is a good example of someone like that. You can go back to Jordy Nelson, a long time ago, but that's, Bill Snyder did it, and Chris Kleiman is doing it. One thing that I think is kind of cool about the coaches now, the head coaches at Kansas State and at KU, is they are multiple national championship winners at lower levels. Kleiman, obviously FCS at North Dakota State, and Leipold in Division III at Wisconsin Whitewater. So they know what winning is. They know what it's like to build a program within your division to be the nation's best. And so they have that. Not that always is going to work at the end, but they have that experience. I think that's significant. All right, Kellis, let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll switch sports and talk a little K-State basketball. Okay, we're back with Kellis Robinett. We're talking all things Kansas State sports for the first time in quite a while. Enjoying doing this. We mentioned at the top of the show, Kellis, that the Kansas State finished 9-20 in basketball, but man, it was a different team in the final couple of weeks, 3 weeks of the season than it was early on. I won't even mention the Fort Hays State game. So let's. They played Baylor terrific in the Big 12 tournament. They won a Big 12 tournament game and then played Baylor really well. So there's enough coming back, I think, to believe that Bruce Weber can expect a team that is not only better, but significantly better this season.
I agree. It's interesting to hear fans talk about the future of Kansas State basketball right now, because there are certainly some who just can't get over the struggles they've had the last 2 seasons. And I certainly understand that. They've been rocky. But at the same time, if you can find a way to look past that and just zero in on how they finished the season and what they have coming back, the future actually does look pretty bright. It never guarantees success, certainly, but if you only look at their last 6 or 7 games last season, when they started playing really good defense and got some continuity and actually stuck to a starting lineup that had the 4 guards surrounding Davion Bradford, I think they played at a level that was worthy of the NCAA tournament. They beat Oklahoma. They were right there with Baylor. They had a winning Big 12 record down the stretch. They beat TCU twice, and by pretty good margins. That first game in the Big 12 tournament when they played them, they beat them by, was it 21?
Yeah,
25, something like
no
that?
No contest game.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you're crushing another Big 12 team that wasn't Iowa State last year, that's a pretty good sign of what you can do. Because, I mean, the league top to bottom, again, other than Iowa State, was really competitive. And Baylor went on to win the whole thing, and nobody really, other than, I mean, Oklahoma State did beat them in the Big 12 tournament, but other than that, K-State played them harder than Gonzaga did in the national championship game. Now, I mean, obviously the circumstances are a little bit different. Baylor probably was playing at a higher level against Gonzaga than they did against Kansas State, but it's still the same team. I still think it's a sign of, what they can do moving forward. And I really like the young core talent they have coming back. I think Nigel Pack, if he can build off what he did last season, could be one of their best. He was one of their best freshmen they've had under Bruce Weber. I think he could be one of their best sophomores. Same thing for Davion Bradford. He really came on late last season. So if he can get even better, then all of a sudden you're looking at maybe having one of the better 5s in the league. And then you look at the transfers they've added. I mean, I like them all. I like Marquise Noel. I think he brings some valuable shooting. I like Mark Smith. I think he could slide in and just instantly take over the DeJuan Gordon role in the trade they had with Missouri. And then, Ishmael Massoud is a little bit of a dice roll. I don't know exactly what he's going to bring, but he's a 4-man who can shoot the lights out. And he's got a 31-point game on his resume from last year, Wake Forest. So I'm not going to say that's a bad addition. If you can figure out a way to sprinkle him into the offense and get some points out of him, then that's great. I think they're going to have more versatility next season. And if they can figure out a way to, blend all that stuff together, then I do think you're looking at a team that can be right there for the NCAA tournament and make people forget a little bit about the last 2 years. The question is, how do they blend that all together? Because they do have more versatility. Last year, it's weird. One of the things I think that helped them more than anything is they didn't have any versatility. By the end of the season, it was basically, all right, this is the only way we can play. You're our 6-7 guys. Get out there and do it. And it worked. It blended together, and now you're going out and adding in the possibility of going back with a bigger lineup, bringing in some new faces. So, it's a good problem to have. You definitely want to have more bodies who contribute than less, but at the same time, it's not going to be the exact same thing. So it'll put Bruce Weber's coaching acumen to the test. Can he figure out a way to blend it all together and have a winning combination? If so, then I think they'll go out and have a good team. But if not, and then we'll see some struggles again.
Well, and it's an important year for Bruce Weber as well, isn't it? I mean, there were some fans that wanted to see change after this season. I understand that argument. I've got to think that a third straight disappointing year could be, the catalyst for change at Manhattan.
Yes, I agree. And I think the beauty of next season is it really will paint a pretty clear picture of the way the program is going. The last 2 years, is as disappointing as they've been. There've just been a lot of other factors. 2 years ago, those guys just coming off a Big 12 championship hadn't played the minutes previously necessary to carry on that tradition. Last year, COVID, all these newcomers, just a lot of reasons why they weren't successful. But those are kind of out the window now. They're going to have experience at every position, not senior experience necessarily, but think about it. Nigel Pack's going to be sophomore. He played all last year. Mike McGurl's played as much as anybody in the league. Davion Bradford played all last year. And then you've got bringing in these transfers who've played previously. Selton Miguel played a bunch last year. So you're gonna have experience. That's going to go out the window. That's not an excuse anymore. You're going to have more offense. That's really not an excuse anymore. I mean, I think next year you can debate how good the team needs to be to, warrant some kind of contract extension or something like that. Maybe it's the NIT. A lot of people would say it's the NCAA tournament. And I do find it interesting that Bruce Weber and his assistants, when I've talked to them, have made it very clear their goal is not only to be in the NCAA tournament, but to be in, soundly enough that when they get back to the Big 12 tournament next year in Kansas City, they're not trying to play their way in. They're already in. They want to be. They don't necessarily want to be on the bubble. They want to be in comfortably. And I think that's a reasonable goal.
And Kellis, I wanted to finish up by talking a little baseball, maybe a better than expected season for the Bat Cats. Always like that nickname for
it's a good one.
State. Yeah. Maybe not. Speaking of, we're talking about basketball possibly on the bubble next year. Don't want to be on the bubble. Seems like baseball right now would be on, if there is a bubble, and of course there is, they're not on the right side of it. What's left to be done for Kansas State baseball to make itself attractive for the NCAA selection committee?
Well, they got to win games with the time they have left. They hurt themselves a little bit over the weekend by failing to win their series at Baylor. Not only did they not win it in the games that didn't involve Jordan Wicks pitching, they were blown off the face of the earth. They lost 17-2 and then 23-3 in a 7-inning game their last time out. That's not going to impress anybody.
Yikes.
And it's interesting. They're going up against Kansas next in a series that really is going to be important for both teams. But Kansas actually is coming off a game where they were no hit by Oklahoma State. And I believe they lost 19-0 if that was the score. So one team's coming off a 23-3 loss, the other 19-0. You could say they're both going to be hungry for a win in that game. But yeah, so Kansas State right now, I was actually a little surprised that they haven't been, mentioned more as a bubble team, because despite what I just said, that last loss, they are 28-18. They got 7 Big 12 wins, which is normally good enough to be right there on the bubble. The magic number, I've kind of looked it up in the past, has been about 34, 35 wins. If you're a Power 5 team and you get to around that number, that's usually good enough to get you a bid to a regional. So that means Kansas State's looking at, they need to figure out a way probably to get 6 more wins minimum. And they've got 6 left, plus the Big 12 tournament if they get there. So KU coming up next. If they can win that series, TCU, who's one of the very best teams in the country, if they can win that series, maybe that gives them a little bit of leeway. Beat a top 10 team. Maybe they don't need to get to 34, 35 wins. But if they can win the next 2 series and then have a good showing in the Big 12 tournament, that would give them a chance. But anything less than that, and they're going to be home just like pretty much every single other Kansas State team this season for the postseason. Yeah,
that's we'll talk about that at a later date. But unlike other sports, there's no NIT for baseball. If you're not in the NCAA, your season is over. All right, Kellis, it was great catching up, and we'll do it again some other time.
All right, thanks, Blair.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to our SportsBeat KC production staff of Derek Donovan, Beth Welsh, Monty Davis, Jeff Rosen, Chris Fickett, and Savannah Smith. Big thanks to Kellis Robinett for stopping by and talking Kansas State. Links to his stories can be found in the show notes and on kansascity.com. Hey, we got another deal for you. You can subscribe to Sports Pass for 99 cents a month. That's right, 99 pennies a month. Sports Pass is the online version of the Star Sports section. You get all the stories that appear in the print editions of the Star, plus many more stories that appear only on the website, and you certainly get the website stories first. After 3 months, it auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless you cancel. And what a great time to subscribe. You read about what's going on with the Chiefs, the Royals, the colleges, our soccer teams, and much more. How do you get it? Go to kansascity.com/sportspass2020. That's kansascity.com/sportspass2020. You want more than just sports coverage? Check out the entire Kansas City Star product. Sports, news, features, commentary, and analysis, the whole thing. You get all the stories written by my talented colleagues, plus additional national news, sports, and business coverage with the e-edition. The details for all of these deals can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. And I know that's a lot of dots and dashes. If you're having trouble hunting down any of these offers, just send me an email Kerkhoff at kcstar.com, and I'll get you to the right place. So whether it's a sports pass or the full subscription, you're getting in supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back on Thursday with another episode.